Have you ever imagined waking up on a freezing winter day in a pitch-black room so dark you cannot see your own hand in front of you, lying on a hard mattress made from horsehide and straw, without a trace of warmth from a central heating system? If not, then the following story will pull you into an ancient, mysterious, and cold world. The world of those who once lived in Victorian houses, where modern conveniences were just a distant dream. Late at night, the cramped room, like a rickety wooden box, is covered in darkness. A young man opens his eyes, trying to adjust his vision in the night. The room has no windows, or if there are any, they are tightly locked. In the air, a faint smell of coal smoke mingled with the strong scent of beeswax fills the space, making it suffocating. He lies on a mattress as hard as stone, made from rough horsehide covered with a layer of stiff, interwoven straw, which was used long ago because there was no other choice. The cold, biting air seeps through every crack, penetrating the thin fabric surrounding him. The bone-chilling cold makes his heart contract. Each breath feels frozen. There is no central heating here. Only a tiny stove sits in the corner, but the coal had almost burned out since the previous afternoon. The last sparks cast a dim light, unable to warm the gloomy atmosphere. The cold now is like an invisible creature, enveloping, drowning everything, pushing people down to the depths of loneliness and despair. Suddenly, a faint sound echoes from the hallway, touching the old wooden wall and creating a cold reverberation. He startles and listens carefully. Is it footsteps, or just the wind whistling through the door cracks? Every passing minute in the room grows heavier and more meaningful. The flickering light of a small candle in a glass jar makes his shadow dance on the wall, forming strange shapes. Could there be something hidden deep in the darkness? Or is it just the imagination of a soul frozen by loneliness? He had heard people tell about life in Victorian houses, ancient buildings with beautiful architecture, seemingly symbols of luxury and power. But in reality, behind that appearance was a living environment much harsher than imagined. No electricity, no running water, no modern heating system. All daily activities took place in poor conditions, with flickering oil lamps and crude beds. People then faced cold, damp climates and diseases arising from poor hygiene. He recalls stories his grandmother used to tell about freezing winter nights when the moans and even sighs of neighbors echoed through thin walls. Many people could not survive the winter, succumbing to frostbite or illness. There were nights when he woke up in the cold, that's hearing the silent crying of a child next door. Those sounds haunted him like a harsh reminder of how fragile life in this house really was. That mattress made from horsehide and straw was not just a place to sleep, but a testament to deprivation and hardship. The dry, stiff straw could not provide softness or warmth. Dead horsehide was used as padding, a terrible idea for anyone accustomed to modern life. He tries to turn over, but the straw crackles like shattered glass, making the night even more frightening. In his mind arises a thought. If anyone knew he was living in these conditions, they would be shocked or even pity him. But he had no other choice. As the weak sunlight begins to seep through the window crack, he still lies there, feeling the cold continuously spreading in the room. His body is sore, his spirit drooping from lack of sleep and warmth. He knows he must get up and face a new, difficult day. The footsteps of a servant echo outside, accompanied by the sound of a broom sweeping the floor and the smell of flour from the nearby kitchen. The servant will come to light the fire, but that is just a small light in a sea of gloom. He crawls up, his cold fingers struggling to find clothes to cover himself. Every movement hurts because his body has not adapted to this harsh cold. People often see Victorian houses as luxurious mansions, but inside, not everyone lived prosperously. Some rooms were abandoned, without human presence, without warmth. Those were places where painful stories were buried. He wonders, are there secrets hidden within these walls? Whispers, silent pains of those who once lived here? And could he find any ray of light in this cold darkness? Life spares no one. He witnesses daily the struggle of people fighting to survive, battling the cold, hunger, and sickness. Neighbors have to use hot water to warm their hands, then press them against their chests to stop the sharp cough. He knows he needs to be stronger, cannot let these conditions drown his will. But sometimes despair feels like an invisible monster tearing at his soul. Then, on a cold night when everything seems most hopeless, he sees the light from a flickering oil lamp outside the window. A small light, but enough to partly dissolve the surrounding darkness. It is a sign of life, of unyielding resilience. He smiles, heart full of hope. Maybe modern conveniences have not arrived yet, but humans always find a way to live and win. When you step into an old Victorian house, the first thing is not the sparkling light of chandeliers or luxurious furniture. It is a special atmosphere. A strange scent, a mix of smoldering coal smoke and gentle beeswax candle, faintly lingering in every corner, clinging to the skin, slipping into every door crack, every fiber of cloth. It sounds romantic, but in reality, that smell is not as pleasant as you think. It is no coincidence that the smell of coal smoke and beeswax became the specialty of Victorian houses. It is the trace of a precarious life, lacking modern conveniences, where people had to find every way to survive in difficult conditions. Smoke columns rise from chimneys, swirling in the humid air, forming a misty and haunting veil. Coal smoke is not only the only heat source, but also the culprit making the air stuffy, dusty, and polluted. As for beeswax candles, seemingly a luxury, a sign of sophistication, they are part of the tragedy. Used because there is no electric light, but emitting suffocating burnt wax odor, making everything dimmer and more oppressive. That night, in the cold room with a hard mattress and dry straw, the young man slowly opens his eyes, but instead of feeling fresh air or comfort, he is pushed into a sensory chaos. A thick smoke invades his nose, making his eyes sting and dry. He takes a deep breath, feeling its heaviness like an invisible enemy imprisoning him in a foggy maze. Coal smoke is not simply hot gas. It carries impurities, dirt, and tiny coal particles floating in the air. At that time, there was no air filtration or effective ventilation system to escape. He knows many people in the neighborhood live in such conditions daily, every second, regardless of freezing winter or scorching summer. The light in the house mainly comes from candles made of beeswax, a material created by nature itself but full of paradox. The burning wax smell is not a sweet fragrance but a suffocating, pungent odor that awakens all the senses in the room to the point of tension. The wax scent mixed with coal smoke creates a unique atmosphere of a time when everything was primitive and temporary. The fragile candle flickers bit by bit, the light splashes on the old wooden wall, casting ghostly shadows, adding to the mysterious and eerie feeling. He sits up, eyes scanning the small room, trying to breathe steadily to avoid suffocation from the characteristic smoke and wax smell. The room feels like a time prison, where everything still lingers the breath of the past. Suddenly, he recalls folk tales about ghosts haunting Victorian houses, rumors about people who once lived here but were drowned in the stifling atmosphere, suffocated by the suffocating smell of smoke and wax. Some say these are the sighs of the past, a reminder of the pain and suffering of those who fought to survive. In the darkness, he begins to notice the smallest sounds, the crackling fire, the rustling straw on the floor, the soft sigh of the slowly burning candle. Sometimes the sound seems like a plea, a call from the souls of the deceased, as if they want to escape the invisible trap of the past. He does not know whether it is imagination or truth, but the presence of these sounds and scents makes the room frighteningly alive. Not only a living environment, coal smoke and beeswax candles make people deeply feel loneliness, isolation, and helplessness. He feels as if himself is drowning in a black and white painting, where all vivid colors have been taken away. In that space, his thoughts became chaotic and vague. The smell of smoke wrapped around memories, making joyful moments feel distant like an unreachable dream. But amid the cold and suffocating air, he realized an important thing. That scent was not only a trace of tragedy, but also a testament to a fierce will to live. The ancients tried to make use of what nature gave. Beeswax for light, coal for warmth, to prolong life, even at the cost of discomfort and danger. It is precisely in the worst conditions that humans show resilient strength and extraordinary endurance. When the dawn faintly glowed outside the window, he stood up, took a deep breath, and looked around the room filled with the smell of smoke and wax. He understood that although the air here was stuffy and hard to breathe, it was still the home of people with warm hearts, enduring all the cruelest trials. And he, like those who came before, would continue to move forward to seek the true light in a world full of mysteries and challenges. As the night faded, the old Victorian house remained shrouded in thick darkness and the characteristic smell of coal smoke. The cold still surrounded every corner. The room retained its bone-chilling coldness. The smoke lingered like an invisible ghost. But at that moment, a mysterious figure began to appear. The servant. That very servant was the only guiding light, the initial warmth that lit up a tiny world amidst the gloomy darkness. In the small room of the young man just waking after a long, cold night, soft footsteps echoed through the old wooden hallway. Those footsteps were not of a wealthy master, but of the servant, a silent figure whom no one truly cared about, yet played a crucial role in the morning routine of the house. He clearly heard each quiet step, sensed the servant's presence through distinctive sounds. Light knocks on the wooden door, the crackling fire of coal, the clinking of utensils in the dark. The servant, with skillful hands and extensive experience, began the most important task, lighting the first fire in the small fireplace in the corner of the room. The flickering flame rose, spreading a fragile warmth that dispelled a little of the surrounding cold. That shimmering light was not only a source of heat, but also a symbol of life, of the heartbeat still continuing in this old, mysterious house. The young man lying in the room heard the crackling fire, the wind howling less through the door cracks, and felt the warmth gradually spreading through the space. This was the first sign of a new day beginning. In the darkness, the servant moved gently, silently like a ghost. No one remembered their name, no one knew the hardships they endured, but they were the ones ensuring the daily operation of the house. They cleaned, prepared food, stoked the fire, took care of the smallest details. From changing blankets, boiling hot water, preparing breakfast, cleaning stains left by cold air and coal smoke. Every morning, they were the ones who started a long day full of challenges in a harsh environment. Not just servants, but the keepers of the fire for the house. No modern machines, no air conditioning or electric lights. Everything relied entirely on the strength and skills of servants like these. The Victorian house could not operate smoothly without these silent people. They were the lifeblood that kept the old walls from falling into complete ruin. The young man in the cold room realized that his life, though full of suffering and challenges, still had an anchor in those dedicated people. The servants who woke early, endured the cold, kindled the fire, and lit the house. The fire in the house was not just a physical flame, but also the light of hope, of secrets, and untold stories. The servant not only lit the fire, but also kept the family's secrets, heard whispered stories late at night, witnessed everything silently. There were nights when, by the flickering fire, the young man happened to overhear mysterious whispers between the servant and the master, stories about money, sin, forgotten lives. Through many days of observation, he began to realize the servant was not merely a simple servant. They knew more than they said, held secrets, hidden deep within their silent eyes. One night, the fire suddenly went out unexpectedly, leaving only dense darkness and the distinctive smell of smoke. He heard whispers faintly outside the door, threats or warnings. What did the servant do in those moments? And could the fire be lit again, or would it disappear forever, bringing darkness and mystery along with it? The story of the servant and the fire is the story of the bond between humans and the harsh life of the Victorian era. The fire brought warmth, life, and hope. The servant was the keeper and protector of that fire, despite the darkness and cold, despite unnamed challenges. He understood that to survive in that environment required not only physical strength, but also an inner fire that never goes out. When the first light of a new day pierced through the wooden door, the servant had prepared everything, from the warm stove to the simple but sufficient dining table. The footsteps of the master began to echo, and he rose from the cold mattress, stepping outside to face a new day full of challenges, but also full of hope. The flickering fire, the smell of coal smoke and beeswax still lingered, but now it was no longer a prison. It became a symbol of life, resilience, and the mystery of a bygone era. The fire in the fireplace still flickered. Coal smoke mingled with the strong yet suffocating scent of beeswax. The old Victorian house remained immersed in the dense atmosphere of an ancient time, full of hidden mysteries. In some secluded corner, behind the heavy wooden door, a silent battle was taking place. the struggle to maintain personal hygiene in an environment lacking resources and privacy. The new day began not only with the crackling fire and distinctive smell of smoke, but also with a task no less important and difficult: preparing hot water for bathing. There was no automatic water heater or convenient shower like today. The servant had to carry buckets of hot water from the kitchen to the bathroom, a journey full of dangers inside the dark and cramped house. The man in the cold room still clearly felt the bone-chilling cold on his skin, the layers of clothes dampened by the night dew, and he knew he would have to face the difficult bath ahead. The bathroom was not a private space, as we might think. It was a small, damp, dark room, usually far from the bedroom, requiring passage through narrow, cold corridors. The servant always stood outside to assist, prepare hot water, bring towels, and was ready to help with everything. The servant's presence in the bathroom partly dissolved privacy, making bathing awkward and inconvenient. He couldn't help feeling embarrassed, having to rely on this help with every movement seen by others, even just through slightly open doors or echoing sounds in the narrow space. In the darkness, the sound of water pouring, the servant's footsteps, and quiet whispers created a strange symphony. Those sounds made him feel as if he were not alone, but being watched by an invisible presence. It was not just about bathing, but also about shedding every protective layer, the mental hurt of having to present himself to others under unimaginable conditions. Sometimes he wondered whether the servant looked at him with contempt, pity, or simply as a habit, or was it loneliness disguised as service? Personal hygiene was not simply about cleaning the body. With the smoky and dusty air and lack of clean water, maintaining hygiene was a persistent struggle against disease and unpleasant odors. He had witnessed neighbors struggling with skin diseases, sores that never healed, and silent pains that could not be spoken aloud. And the lack of privacy made these problems even more terrifying. Unable to hide or avoid them, he had to face everything nakedly and helplessly. Though able to help, the servant was also a witness to everything. They knew every dark corner, every family secret, and things no one wanted to say. Sometimes their presence made him feel safer, but other times it was a heavy pressure because he knew every move was watched, every breath recorded. A companionship both close and distant, making life in the Victorian house complex and full of contradictions. He realized that maintaining hygiene in such conditions was not only a material issue, but also a lesson in patience, endurance, and tolerance. Each time he bathed, he had to overcome psychological barriers, embarrassment, and the feeling of being exposed before others. He wondered if there could be a life that did not require trading privacy and comfort. One night, when the servant stepped outside, leaving him alone in the small bathroom, the flickering firelight cast faint shadows on the walls. He stood there, warm water flowing down his body, feeling warmth for the first time in many days. That moment was like a dream, a small freedom amid an ocean of darkness and coldness. He understood that although everything around him was harsh and lacking, there were still precious moments to live, to feel, and to fight. Day by day, he gradually realized that each room, each person, each smell of smoke, each flame, and even those closed doors contained an untold story. A story about survival, about secrets buried in darkness and the characteristic smell of smoke, about people and life in an era when convenience was a luxury. At dawn, when the servant's footsteps sounded again, he stepped out of the bath with a clean body but a mind full of thoughts. Would those secrets be revealed in the future? Could people find the privacy, freedom, and comfort they longed for? He knew he was only a small part of the endless flow of history, but his story would be recorded as a reminder for future generations. The story of personal hygiene in a Victorian house was not just a slice of a difficult life, but also a symbol of resilience, silent pain, and the persistent hope of humans in the dark. The old Victorian house, with walls decorated with intricate patterned wallpaper, soft curtains, and luxurious furniture, was once considered a symbol of wealth and sophistication. But behind that glamorous beauty hid a deadly secret. Arsenic, a silent poison commonly used in decorative materials, quietly spreading danger to the house's residents. The young man in the cold room, after painful experiences of life's harshness, now began to notice something strange, a special scent mixed with the smell of beeswax, coal smoke, and something indescribable, sweet but full of danger. That scent came from the walls, decorated with wallpaper containing arsenic, a poison favored in the Victorian era for its bright colors and mold resistance. But few knew that those very walls were slowly draining the health of those living inside, silently causing mysterious illnesses, even bringing them closer to death. By the flickering firelight, he closely examined each pattern on the wallpaper. Bright jade green motifs, flowers printed with arsenic, making the walls eye-catching, but at the same time as dangerous as a trap. The story of arsenic was not just about chemistry or medicine, but also a social tragedy, when both the wealthy and the middle class were poisoned by their own homes. He recalled whispered stories in the dark about mysterious illnesses, unexplained deaths, about fear and confusion spreading in the community. The servant, the keeper of fire and secrets in the house, seemed to know more than he revealed. Once, when the young man asked about the strange scent, the servant silently looked at him with a gloomy gaze, then turned away without a word. That look was like a warning. Not everything we see is truly beautiful. Behind the splendor lies darkness and danger. Day by day, he witnessed relatives and neighbors showing strange signs: fatigue, dizziness, rashes, even memory loss. No one knew the cause, and doctors at that time could not explain satisfactorily. He gradually realized the root lay in the very things they trusted: wallpaper, curtains, even decorative items containing arsenic. The poison evaporated into the air, absorbed through the skin, entering the body day by day. Refusing to let himself and those around him be silently poisoned, he was determined to investigate and expose the truth. He wandered everywhere, asking wallpaper makers, market sellers, and even scientists of that time. Through clues, he discovered a vast network of decorative material producers who put profit above human lives. Arsenic was not only an ingredient in wallpaper, but also used in dyes, cosmetics, and many other products. Its popularity caused many people to be poisoned without knowing. He realized that the Victorian era was not only a time of development, but also an era of dark schemes, where ignorance and greed caused countless tragedies. He knew he had to warn people to push back the looming disaster. But in a society where power and money controlled everything, exposing the truth was not easy. There were nights he stood by the window, watching the flickering fire in the fireplace, thinking about ways to change things. Could he do anything to save his loved ones from the silent death? His story was not just fear, but also a desire to live. The light of the flame in the night, though small, was a symbol of hope and resilience. He decided to keep fighting, to tell his story as a warning to future generations, because even in the thick darkness of the Victorian era, people could still find true light, overcoming silent dangers. The wall containing arsenic was not just a decorative material, but also a symbol of contradiction between outward beauty and inner death, between glory and the darkness of a bygone era. In the Victorian house, the flickering fire was still not enough to chase away the thick shadows. The smell of coal smoke wrapped around the old wooden beams, the scent of beeswax emitted a strong warmth, and behind it all was an invisible enemy silently spreading disaster: toxic arsenic gas released from the decorative materials. The man in the cold room, after enduring many trials, now had to face a new danger, an unseen threat that could take life at any moment. Deader. He noticed something different in the air. Not only the smell of coal smoke and beeswax, but also something sharp and cold, like a strange gas creeping through every room, entering every breath. People could not see or clearly smell it, but the poison existed and spread, silently, smoldering, and dangerously. He wondered if this very house, with its arsenic wallpaper, was becoming a giant trap. He began to observe every sign on his own body and those around him: prolonged fatigue, dizziness, headaches, even unexplained persistent coughing. Doctors of that time could not explain these strange illnesses, and the residents only endured in silence. Arsenic, a toxic substance, was evaporating from decorative materials, from wallpaper to curtains, seeping into the air and becoming an invisible enemy, destroying health day by day. Refusing to be passively poisoned, he started gathering information. He observed, took notes, questioned servants, workers, and even scientists of that time. Every small clue he pieced together, every trace analyzed, gradually revealed a terrifying picture of arsenic gas spreading in the living space. In the darkness of the house, there were stories never spoken about sudden deaths, about young people tormented by illness, about hopeless sighs. He heard the whispers of servants, the gloomy eyes, and even secret warnings. Don't let light drive away the darkness. Some secrets should remain forever in the dark. He understood he was facing an invisible enemy, countless, unseen, yet more dangerous than any monster. Every breath was a gamble. Every step in the house was a potential danger. And he could not leave this place because it was home, memory, life, despite the dangers. Life in the Victorian house was an interweaving of light and darkness, of life and death. He was determined not to let arsenic poison turn the house into a deadly prison. He wanted to find a way to kindle the flame of hope to save himself and his loved ones. The story of arsenic poison was not just one man's story, but a common tragedy of an era when people did not yet know the full danger around them. But amid the darkness, there was still light. And in his heart, the flame never went out. The flame of the desire to live, of struggle, and of hope. The story of invisible poison spreading in the Victorian house was a warning for all generations. That sometimes danger does not lie in what we see, but in what silently creeps into every breath. The old Victorian house, with its toxic decorated walls, the flickering fire in the fireplace, and the air mixed with the smell of coal smoke and beeswax candles, contained not only mysteries of life and death, but also hid another danger: poor quality food and drink that made the residents' lives full of risks, threatening their health every day. The man in the cold room had now grown used to the hardships of Victorian life. But one thing always troubled him was the bitter taste of the morning coffee, something considered a stimulating drink that gave energy to start the day. The coffee aroma was not fragrant as imagined, but a strong bitterness, so intense it made him grip the cup's rim tightly, trying to swallow each warm sip while unable to avoid the unpleasant feeling. He wondered whether this was a sign of something wrong or simply the consequence of poor quality ingredients and unhygienic processing. The servant, the firekeeper, and the keeper of secrets in the house seemed to know more than they revealed. Once, when the young man asked about the strange scent, the servant silently looked at him with gloomy eyes, then turned away without a word. That gaze was like a warning. Not everything we see is truly beautiful. Behind the glitter lies darkness and danger. Day by day, he witnessed relatives and neighbors beginning to show strange signs: fatigue, dizziness, rashes, even memory loss. No one knew the cause, and doctors of that time could not explain satisfactorily. The young man gradually realized that the root lay in the very things they trusted: wallpaper, curtains, even decorative items containing arsenic. The poison flew into the air, absorbed through the skin, infiltrating the body little by little. Refusing to let himself and those around him be silently poisoned, he was determined to investigate and expose the truth. He wandered everywhere, questioning wallpaper makers, market vendors, and even scientists of that era. Through each clue, he discovered a vast network of decorative material and manufacturers who put profit above human life. Arsenic was not only an ingredient in wallpaper, but also used in dyes, cosmetics, and many other products. Its widespread use caused many to be poisoned unknowingly. He realized that the Victorian era was not only a time of development, but also an era of dark schemes where ignorance and greed caused countless tragedies. He knew he had to warn people to push back the looming disaster. But in a society controlled by power and money, exposing the truth was not easy. Some nights he stood by the window, watching the flickering fire in the fireplace, thinking about ways to make a change. Could he do anything to save his loved ones from the silent death? His story was not just fear, but a yearning for life. The light of the flame in the night, though small, was a symbol of hope and resilience. He decided to continue fighting, to tell his story as a warning for future generations. Because even in the dense darkness of the Victorian era, people could find true light, overcoming silent dangers. The arsenic wall, not just a decorative material, but a symbol of contradiction between outward beauty and inner death, between glory and darkness of a bygone era. In the Victorian house, the flickering fire was still not enough to dispel the thick darkness. The smell of coal smoke wrapped around the old wooden beams, the scent of beeswax emitted pungent warmth, and behind it all was an invisible enemy silently spreading disaster: toxic arsenic gas from decorative materials. The young man in the cold room, after months of trials, now had to face a new danger, a hazard unseen but capable of taking life at any moment. He noticed differences in the air, not just the smell of coal smoke and beeswax, but something cold, like a strange air sneaking through every room, entering every breath. People could not see it, could not clearly smell it, but the poison existed and spread, silently, smoldering, and dangerous. He wondered if it was this very house, with arsenic wallpapered walls, becoming a giant trap. He began observing every sign on his body and those around him. Prolonged fatigue, dizziness, headaches, even unexplained persistent coughs. Doctors then could not explain these strange illnesses, and the household residents only endured silently. Arsenic, a toxic substance, was evaporating from decorative materials, from wallpaper to curtains, absorbing into the air and becoming an invisible enemy, destroying health day by day. Refusing to be passively poisoned, the young man began gathering information. He observed, took notes, asked questions to servants, craftsmen, and even scientists of that time. Each small clue he connected, each trace analyzed, gradually revealed a terrifying picture of arsenic gas spreading in the living space. In the darkness of the house, there were stories never spoken, about sudden deaths, about young people tormented by illness, about hopeless sighs. He heard the whispers of the servant, gloomy eyes, and silent warnings. Do not let light dispel the darkness. Some secrets should remain forever in the dark. He understood that he was facing an invisible enemy, uncountable, unseen, yet more dangerous than any monster. Every breath was a gamble. Every step in the house was a potential danger. And he could not leave this place, for it was home, memories, life despite the dangers. Life in the Victorian house was an intertwining of light and darkness, life and death. The young man was determined not to let toxic arsenic turn the house into a deadly prison. He wanted to find a way to kindle the flame of hope, to save himself and his loved ones. The story of arsenic poison was not just the story of one person, but a collective tragedy of an era when people did not fully know the dangers around them. But amid the darkness, there was light. And in his heart, the flame never went out, the flame of yearning for life, of struggle, and of hope. The story of invisible poisons spreading in the Victorian house was a warning for all generations, that sometimes danger is not in what we see, but in the things silently infiltrating every breath. The old Victorian house, with its walls decorated with toxic substances, the flickering flames in the fireplace, and the air mixed with the smell of coal smoke and beeswax candles, not only contained mysteries of life and death, but also hid another danger: poor quality food and drinks that made the residents' lives full of risks, threatening their health day by day. The young man in the cold room had now grown accustomed to the hardships of Victorian life, but one thing always puzzled him was the bitter taste of the morning coffee. A drink considered stimulating, providing energy to start the day. The smell of coffee was not fragrant as imagined, but a strong, bitter taste, so intense that he had to clutch the cup's rim tightly, trying to swallow each warm sip without avoiding the unpleasant feeling. He wondered whether this was a sign of something wrong or simply the consequence of poor quality raw materials and unsanitary processing. The meal was carefully prepared with a series of small dishes, from crispy breads, rich pâtés, to marinated vegetables and sauces with complex layered flavors. Each small dish carried its own beauty, rich flavors that made one fascinated and excited to savor every bite. But the young man, with the vigilance forged through many trials, could not help but feel a smoldering suspicion deep inside. He recalled times enjoying bitter coffee, unpasteurized milk, and foods preserved in containers made of toxic lead. The small dishes on the table were no exception. Many of them might have come into contact with arsenic, lead, or other harmful chemicals, from raw ingredients to the processing and preservation stages. Sweetness, richness, sourness, or saltiness, all could be masks hiding dangers invisible to the naked eye. In the cozy space of the house, voices and laughter rang out, but beneath them were dangers no one cared to notice. The young man looked at everyone at the table, the worried eyes of the mother, the fatigue of the children, the cautious gestures of the father. Although the many small dishes brought richness and fullness, this diversity did not guarantee absolute safety, and this was the most frightening part. He understood that in this era, not only toxic decorative materials or spreading poisonous gases, but also daily meals were battles against harmful agents. The lack of knowledge, preservation technology, and hygiene control made people easily exposed to toxins without realizing it. He felt a rising helplessness, but also a motivation not to remain silent about the looming dangers. The servant, who once helped him light the fire, prepare hot water, now led him into the hidden corners of the kitchen where the food was prepared. Through whispered stories, he learned many horrifying secrets about the ingredients, methods of preparation, and food preservation. The servant told of times when they had to use dirty water, toxic containers, and even fake ingredients to deceive the owners. He heard tragic stories about people who had suffered serious illnesses or died from foodborne diseases. These were unexplained deaths, mysterious illnesses, and silent cries in the shadows of the house. These stories made him even more determined to investigate and warn others. Not stopping at identifying the dangers, he began searching for solutions, from selecting ingredients, preparation, to preservation and hygiene control. He contacted young scientists, doctors, and even those knowledgeable in folk medicine to find ways to make life safer. Although the many small dishes were full of risks, the young man believed that knowledge and awareness could change the reality. He dreamed of a day when meals would not only offer diverse flavors, but also guarantee health and life. The story of the many small but unsafe dishes in the Victorian house was not only a slice of history, but also a profound lesson for today's generations. Those silent dangers were warnings to cherish health, prioritize safety, and continuously seek knowledge. The old Victorian house still immersed in a dense atmosphere of secrets and silent threats. Not only the walls containing arsenic, not only poisonous gases or toxic foods, but also the women's garments, tight corsets with layers of heavy skirts, silently imprisoned and tortured the women in the shadows. The young man in the cold room now not only witnessed physical dangers, but also felt the spiritual and physical suffocation of the women in the family and neighborhood. In the small room, a young woman wearing a tight corset stood before the mirror, her eyes full of sadness and fatigue. The corset squeezed her waist tightly, making it hard for her to breathe, move, and causing pain with every breath. On her were layers of heavy skirts, thick fabrics like invisible shields pressing down on her body, making every step heavy and difficult. Wearing a corset was not just a fashion habit, but a symbol of control, of strict standards imposed on women. The lacing continuously tightened, causing her to almost lose the ability to breathe deeply, walk with difficulty, and rely on help for many daily tasks. The physical pain, combined with the feeling of being trapped within social constraints, made her increasingly tired and desperate. The young man witnessed bruises, deep marks on the flesh, and unsightly wrinkles caused by the corset. Women in the neighborhood often struggled with back pain, indigestion, and other health problems due to heavy and tight clothing. However, to conform to social standards and be considered beautiful, they had to endure and hide those pains. Every step was a challenge, every movement a consideration. Women could not turn or bend comfortably without feeling constrained. They were limited in their mobility, in the freedom of their bodies, making life more difficult than ever. The servant, already familiar with all household activities, was the one who witnessed most clearly the difficulties and pains of the women. They silently helped with putting on and taking off corsets, sharing stories of silent endurance and sacrifice. The servant's eyes held compassion and understanding, but could do little more than remain silent and serve. Not only physical pain, the corset also symbolized the suffocation of the spirit, the binding by strict social rules and prejudices about women. The young man felt the despair inside the young woman's heart, the yearning for freedom, yet imprisoned in an invisible corset. One night, she sat before the mirror, looking deeply into her own eyes in the tight corset. She wondered if it was possible to live a free, comfortable life, or if she must forever live in the chains of the era. That question echoed in her mind, creating an inner storm with no known answer. Though suffering, she still nurtured a desire to live truly as herself, to escape invisible bonds. She began seeking ways to change, new ideas, knowing that it could be condemned by society. The young man saw in her eyes not only pain, but also the flame of resilience and hope. Despite the tight corset and heavy layers of dresses, she dreamed of a day when women could move freely, live freely, and express themselves freely. The story of Victorian women's clothing was not only about pain and limitation, but also a symbol of the struggle for freedom and social change. The young man understood that those pains would not be meaningless if passed down, so future generations would appreciate freedom and health more. The corset, the invisible enemy imprisoning women's bodies and spirits, was a symbol of challenges and aspirations to rise above in a dark era. The ancient Victorian house was immersed in the darkness of an era both splendid and full of deadly mysteries. Behind walls containing arsenic, dangerous foods, suffocating clothes, a new danger now infiltrated every powder packet, every lipstick, and every dyed fabric, toxic chemicals like arsenic and mercury. The young man in the cold room, having faced many dangers in life, now had to witness the horrifying scene of beauty created by deadly silent poisons. Victorian women believed that beauty was not only a gift from heaven, but a duty to maintain at all costs. Cosmetics, from powders to lipsticks, became weapons to hide fatigue and aging. But few knew that inside those cosmetic jars were arsenic and mercury, poisons that could damage the brain, destroy kidneys, and even cause death. The young man saw women in the house applying fine white powder to their faces, painting their lips with bright red lipstick, dazzling beauty traded for pain and danger. He realized the white powder was not only makeup, but also a mask filled with toxins, penetrating the skin, causing inflammation, damage, and skin diseases. Many women in the neighborhood began to show sores, pimples, and strange incurable symptoms. Not only cosmetics, fabrics dyed in bright colors with toxic chemicals like arsenic and mercury made wearers come into daily direct contact with poison. The young man witnessed women wearing magnificent dresses, but their health was deteriorating, pale and tired. Bright colors became a dangerous trap, enchanting and gradually poisoning people. The servant who witnessed daily life told him about sudden deaths, strange diseases, and suspicions about the connection between cosmetics, clothes, and health. The servant's silent eyes held compassion and fear that could not be spoken aloud. The young man began to delve deeply into the investigation, researching the toxins used in cosmetics and fabric dyes. He discovered a complex network of profit-driven manufacturers who disregarded human lives to produce and sell dangerous products. He witnessed many facing a difficult choice, pursuing beauty according to societal standards or preserving health and life. Many chose to pay the price, accepting pain and danger to maintain an attractive appearance. Nevertheless, he also saw positive signs from those beginning to understand the truth, from pioneering doctors and scientists warning and advocating change. He believed that with knowledge and awareness, people could overcome silent dangers to build a truly healthy and beautiful future. The story of toxic chemicals in cosmetics and fabric dyes was not only a warning about the dangers of false beauty, but also a journey to seek truth and a desire for authentic living. The young man looked out the window. The dawn light shone through, carrying hope for a day when beauty would no longer come at the cost of health and life. Victorian beauty, a beauty soaked with blood and tears, was evidence of the silent dangers humans had to face to pursue harsh standards and social illusions. The ancient Victorian house, once a symbol of power, refinement, and style, was now gradually revealing terrifying secrets about the true cost of beauty in that era. Behind walls containing arsenic, suffocating corsets, and poisonous items, beauty routines using cosmetics with dangerous chemicals had created a deadly trap, pushing many women into horrific health nightmares. The young man in the cold room now had to witness the silent destruction caused by costly beauty habits, which not everyone dared to face and admit. In Victorian society, beauty was considered a measure of dignity, elegance, and success. Women continuously bound themselves to strict standards: pale white skin, flawless faces, bright red lips, and perfectly slim figures. But behind layers of makeup, luxurious dresses, and tight corsets was a story of pain, disease, and even death. The young man observed the women in families and neighborhoods, clearly seeing signs of fatigue, swelling, and strange illnesses that no one dared to speak of. Long-term exposure to arsenic, mercury, and toxins in cosmetics and fabric dyes seriously damaged many people's nervous systems, kidneys, and immune systems. Symptoms like chronic headaches, memory loss, seizures, and persistent fatigue became unavoidable companions. He heard stories of women who once radiated beauty but ultimately had to live in pain and helplessness, even dying alone and in despair. In a society where beauty was placed above all, health problems were not publicly discussed or acknowledged. Women had to hide illnesses, continuing to use harmful products to maintain a perfect image, despite knowing the high price. Servants and relatives silently witnessed, but could do nothing except serve and keep secrets. The young man clearly saw the pain of a young woman, physically and mentally wasting away day by day, but still trying to get up to wear a corset and apply lipstick, like to step into the harsh outside world with a perfect appearance. Beauty was not just an adornment, but a shackle, a confinement of body and soul. The pain came not only from the body, but also from the internal struggle between the desire for freedom and social pressure. He witnessed lonely moments when the woman looked in the mirror and questioned whether the price was worth it. Though immersed in darkness, the young man saw small rays of light, people beginning to realize the danger, pioneering scientists, and growing voices of resistance. He believed that although the cost of Victorian beauty was once very high, awakening and awareness could save future generations. This story was not only a warning for those pursuing beauty while forgetting health, but also a lesson in humanity about the true value of people beyond outer glamour. The young man stood by the window, the dawn light shining as a promise of a brighter future where beauty was no longer pain but life. Victorian beauty, a symbol not only of luxury, but also of silent sacrifices and a high price that not everyone could see. The heavy door of the Victorian house closed behind the young man, giving way to a completely different world. It was not a luxurious space with sparkling lights, but a street full of dangers. Muddy sludge, horse manure scattered everywhere, emitting a foul stench, making every step on the street a tense battle for survival. The young man stepped outside, his shoes heavy with mud, and quickly had to use a mud scraper, a weapon indispensable to those living in this era. Every moment, every step on that harsh road reminded him of the brutality of the Victorian age. A world where the glamorous exterior was not necessarily the truth, but a facade hiding many dark secrets. His footsteps echoed through the shabby streets. Pools of black mud reflected the flickering light of oil lamps, scattered across the road like invisible traps waiting to swallow anyone careless. Horse manure, the unwanted gift from hundreds of draft horses pulling carts, covered the street, creating a thick atmosphere that forced passersby to cover their noses to avoid suffocation. Without a modern drainage system, the street often flooded whenever it rained. The foul smell, a mixture of mud and horse manure, assaulted his senses violently. Some street vendors tried to promote their goods amid the filth, but no matter how hard they tried, the stench could not be overcome. He took from his pocket the metal mud scraper, an essential weapon to protect his leather shoes from getting soiled and damaged. The scraping sound rang out steadily, mingling with the clatter of horse-drawn wheels, hurried footsteps of passers-by, and the groans of tired horses. Maintaining hygiene in such a filthy city was a tough task. Clean shoes not only helped avoid disease, but also symbolized respect and social status. He knew that if he entered those luxurious houses with shoes covered in mud, people would immediately glance and judge him. He saw neighbors, poor laborers struggling daily amidst mud and horse manure, women with soaked clothes, rough hands rummaging through trash, and barefoot children wading through the mud searching for scraps. They lived in poverty but had to face pollution and high risks of disease. He heard the dry cough of an old man sitting by the roadside, his eyes sad and weary. Every breath in that thick air seemed to suck out the life force, making health deteriorate day by day. Horse-drawn carts were the main means for transporting goods and traveling, but the presence of hundreds of horses turned the street into a filthy and dangerous maze. Horse manure scattered everywhere, soaked into the ground, forming sticky mud, breeding grounds for mosquitoes and disease-causing bacteria. Horses were also often injured due to the narrow, dirty streets. Moving through the streets became a major challenge. People had to cross deep mud pools, keep balance on slippery sidewalks, and frequently stumbled, getting covered in dirt and mud. Merchants had to close their shops early due to the suffocating atmosphere and inability to attract customers. Residents limited going outside except for essential matters. Mud and horse manure not only caused annoyance, but were sources of contagious diseases. Outbreaks of cholera, malaria, and many other illnesses often erupted in the community, killing many, especially children and the elderly. Moreover, slippery mud led to many serious falls, making life even harder for the people. Not only the mud and horse manure made life difficult, but the coal fire inside houses was also a hazard. Wooden houses were flammable, and using coal for heating and cooking created a very high risk of fire and explosion. He had heard fire alarms and witnessed chaos when a house was burned down in moments, destroying the dreams and lives of many. He recalled scenes inside Victorian houses where the landlord's family lived in luxury, comfort, and cleanliness, while servants had to live in small, damp, and dirty rooms. This clear division was not only material, but also shown in how each person interacted with the environment. The family enjoying warm coal fireplaces and spacious living rooms, servants standing outside scraping mud from shoes, living in cold and dust. He felt the loneliness, fatigue, and silent endurance of the servants, those who were always present but never truly seen. He clearly sensed that contrast. The glamour and polish of the house with the smell of coal smoke and beeswax, and the horrible mud and horse manure outside. He understood that to step into life inside that house, one had to endure extreme hardships outside. Not everyone was strong enough to bear it. Though hardships persist, he keeps hope in his heart for a cleaner city, where people don't have to live in mud and horse manure smells, where fire is no longer an enemy but a warm friend. He nurtures ideas for improvement, changes in awareness and infrastructure, hoping that one day soon the street will no longer be a nightmare, but a place of happiness and health. The muddy, manure-filled streets of Victorian times were not only symbols of hardship and filth, but also mirrors reflecting human challenges, society, and the aspiration to overcome fate in a changing world. The young man leaves the muddy street, his shoes still marked with sticky mud, and steps into the warm, dim glow of the old Victorian house. Despite the harsh challenges of poverty and filth outside, inside, the flickering fire in the coal fireplace creates a warm, luxurious, and lively space. But this warmth is not merely comfort, it is a silent threat, a fire that could flare up any time, threatening the lives and safety of everyone in the house. In Victorian times, coal was the main energy source for most households, especially during long, cold months. People used coal for heating, cooking, and lighting. But no one told all the hidden dangers in every smoldering lump of coal and every spark flying from the stove. He has witnessed many serious fires, wooden houses, and precious belongings burned down in just minutes. The house he lives in is no exception. Every night, servants have to tirelessly stoke the coal, maintaining a fire hot enough to warm the whole family, despite the risk that the fire might spread anytime. The servants, silent ghosts in the house, are often the first to face danger. They're used to moving among glowing stoves, eyes wide open to guard against the smallest sparks that could cause a blaze. One bitter winter night, when the wind howled through the door cracks, the young man woke to the sound of a fire alarm ringing through the house. Flames had broken out in the kitchen where coal was being stoked for cooking. Shouts, banging on doors echoed chaotically, along with thick, choking black smoke. Servants ran to save people but could not avoid panic and loss. The house suddenly became a sea of fire, burning not only possessions but memories, dreams, and peace. He stood watching the blazing fire, feeling the fragility of life, the fragility of safety relying on a smoldering flame. From then on, he understood that the warm energy that gives life is also a double-edged sword, harboring many dangers and constant fears. The danger was not just in his family's fireplace, but spread throughout the streets, in houses of both wealthy and common folk. Wooden houses, cramped attics, lacking modern firefighting equipment, could easily become torches once fire started. Many tragic stories told of families burned down, orphaned children, people losing their homes because of sudden fires. He thought about the servants, women and men who worked tirelessly, maintaining the fire to keep warm while living in constant fear of fire outbreaks. They were the silent sufferers who endured the most but received the least attention. Despite knowing the lurking dangers, people at that time had no other choice. Coal was the only fuel source to survive the cold winters. Searching for and transporting coal was also a hard, dangerous job many had to bear. He gradually realized the implicit contradiction in Victorian life, between convenience and danger, between warmth and death, that could come anytime. He stood silently in the room, listening to the crackling fire, feeling each spread of heat, but also deeply sensing the anxiety and constant tension. Life is like that. Sweet warmth often comes with lurking dangers. But he also believed that people always find ways to overcome, and one day soon, fires would no longer be nightmares but friendly companions, bringing peaceful life to everyone. The Victorian house stood proudly in the city with delicately painted walls, clear glass windows reflecting the sparkling light of crystal chandeliers. From outside, people saw only luxury, grandeur, a symbol of power and wealth. But inside those walls was a different story, the story of an unbridgeable divide between two worlds, the wealthy owners and the silent servants who served them. He stepped through the large door, feeling a warmth strikingly different from the cold outside in the muddy street filled with horse manure smells. The crackling coal fire in the fireplace filled the space. The aroma of coffee brewed from selected beans mingled with the beeswax candle scent, making the room warm and full of life. This was the world of the owner's family, where everything was meticulously cared for down to the smallest detail. In the spacious living room, the deep red velvet upholstered chairs, the high-quality hand-woven carpet, the classical painting hanging on the wall, and the old piano all exuded luxury and elegance. Every item was shiny, clean, without a speck of dust or any clutter. However, just by turning into the narrow corridor behind, a completely different space appeared. Simple wooden walls, faint light flickering from oil lamps, and a suffocating, damp atmosphere. This was the servants' living area, silent ghosts attached to the master family's life, but utterly isolated. The young man followed the old servant, passing through small doors, seeing cramped rooms used as resting places, dining, and changing rooms for the staff. The furniture was simple, worn out, with not a bit of comfort or convenience. The walls were moldy, and small windows couldn't keep out the cold from outside. The stark contrast in living conditions between these two worlds shocked him. While the master's family enjoyed every convenience, from soft beds, luxurious bathrooms, to spacious relaxation areas, the servants had to endure crowded, dark, damp rooms lacking basic amenities. He clearly saw the old servant's eyes filled with fatigue, loneliness, but still full of resilience. They silently carried all the heavy work, from lighting fires and cleaning to preparing meals and attending to every need of the masters. They were not allowed to complain or show tiredness, as their existence was tied to the satisfaction of the wealthy family. He recalled stories he had heard about this strict separation. Servants were not allowed to step into the living room unless ordered. They could not sit and eat with the family, nor share household secrets with anyone outside. This difference created an invisible boundary that no one could cross. Beneath the glamorous veneer of wealth, the house's hidden corners held countless pains, injustices, and loneliness. Servants lived in the shadow of the very house they served, imprisoned in lowly status despite making the operation of a noble family possible. The young man gradually felt a conflict within, admiring the beauty and luxury of the family space while deeply sympathizing with the silent people enduring the dark quarters. This division was not only material, but also a division of power, dignity, and fate. Through months of observation, he understood that truly understanding a Victorian house required more than looking at the glamorous exterior. One must look deep into the hidden corners, the dark servant rooms, to see the full picture of life in that era. He dreamed of a world without invisible walls dividing people, where equality and humanity were foremost. A day when servants and masters could share space and life without enduring separation and injustice. The flickering fire in the fireplace, the faint light from candles, along with the laughter and voices in the living room gradually faded, yielding to silence and deep thoughts about differences and hopes for change. The young man stood between these two worlds, carrying a burning desire for justice, compassion, and freedom for all those living in the shadows of a complex era. The old Victorian house stood firmly on a muddy street filled with horse manure and coal dust. Inside, flickering candlelight and the dim glow of gas lamps created a space both mysterious and dangerous. Beneath the luxury and pride were silent dangers that anyone entering had to be cautious and wary of. The young man, who had gone through many hardships on the perilous street, now faced a new challenge: the narrow, steep, slippery staircase covered with coal dust, with dim light and no modern safety measures. Each step up the stairs was like a gamble with death. This staircase was unlike modern ones, wide and with sturdy railings. It was so narrow that only one person could go up at a time, each step steep, rough, covered with moss and mold. Every step required extreme caution, as a small slip could cause a fall onto the cold, hard stone steps below. He remembered horrifying stories of accidents that had occurred in this very house, people seriously injured or even killed from a single slip on the stairs. The saddest part was that these accidents were almost always concealed, as the owners did not want to tarnish the image of elegance and refinement. In the dim light, the young man heard the clattering footsteps of the servant, familiar with every dangerous corner of the house. The old servant reminded him to be careful, though they themselves had often been injured on these narrow, steep stairs. Not only the stairs, but the entire Victorian house lacked the safety standards we consider essential today. No sturdy handrails, no anti-slip systems or emergency alarms, all of which made every step a dangerous challenge. He remembered waiting at the bottom of the stairs when a servant suddenly rushed up or down in the dark. Even a slight stumble could cause them to fall. The silence and constant fear made the house's atmosphere even more suffocating. But the danger was not only on the stairs. The house's lighting mainly relied on gas lamps and candles, sources of light both mysterious and lurking with danger. The gas lamps emitted a warm yellow glow, but also produced toxic gases, especially in airtight, poorly ventilated rooms. The gas could cause breathing difficulties and posed serious risks of suffocation and poisoning. Candles, with their flickering light and beeswax scent, were lit everywhere, but were a major fire hazard. Fires often started from a tiny spark when a candle was blown out by wind or knocked over. In a wooden house full of flammable materials, a single mistake could cause a disaster. He had witnessed chaos when a small flame suddenly burst from a gas lamp in the living room. Screams echoed throughout the house as servants and the master's family raced against time to extinguish the fire before it turned into catastrophe. Fortunately, no one was injured that time, but the burn marks on the walls and ceiling remained a harsh reminder of how fragile safety was. He deeply felt the contradictions in the Victorian house. Luxury and comfort intertwined with ever-present dangers. Unease crept into every corner, every stair-step, every flickering flame. The story of the house was not just about material things, but about people. Wealthy owners with lavish comforts who lived in silent fear. Servants who silently endured injustice, living in dark, unsafe spaces. He wondered if someday such houses would be truly safe, where every stair step was no longer a hazard, every flame no longer an enemy, but a close friend bringing warmth and light. On cold, long nights, the fire in the coal fireplace still smoldered as he stood by the window looking out onto the streets. The muddy roads, horse manure, and coal dust outside awaited change, safer fires and wider stairs for steps leading into the future. He silently hoped for the day when invisible walls of wealth and poverty would fall, so everyone could live in safety and equality. A flickering oil lamp lit the cramped, damp room where he sat opposite a thin, old man with sunken eyes and a horrifically deformed jaw. The man was a match factory worker, victim of a deadly disease called phossy jaw, necrosis of the jawbone caused by prolonged exposure to toxic white phosphorus. The story began in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, when thousands of workers flocked to match factories hoping for a better life. But instead of light and life, many found only pain and death. White phosphorus was widely used in match production because of its flammability. However, workers did not know that this chemical would silently and cruelly steal their smiles, health, and lives. He heard the worker recount the early days on the job when hands were still strong and laughter still lively, but after a short time, dull pain began around the jaw area. Gradually, swelling, necrosis, and discharge made it impossible to eat normally and even brought the threat of death. The persistent pain was not only physical but also mental. Many fell into deep depression, losing the will to live. Suicides due to unbearable pain and despair became common. creating a dark chapter of Victorian industrial life. He witnessed the old worker's tears as he spoke of colleagues who died alone without adequate medical care or a voice in society. Phossy jaw was not only an individual problem, but a symbol of widespread devastation caused by industrial toxins to the entire society. Toxic chemicals robbed workers of their health and caused long-term consequences affecting families, communities, and the economy. He recalled heartbreaking scenes in slums around factories. Poor families, skinny children, women caring for husbands and children while facing scarcity and sickness. All were results of an incomplete era of development where human effort and life were weighed coldly and cruelly. Amid that darkness, he also encountered rays of hope. Doctors, scientists, and social activists began to speak out about the dangers of white phosphorus and other toxic chemicals. They fought to improve working conditions, raise awareness about occupational safety, and find ways to treat the victims. He understood that the story of Phossy Jaw was not just a dark chapter in history, but also a valuable lesson about the importance of safety, respect, and workers' rights throughout all ages. He stood up, looked out the window where streetlights shimmered in the night, and vowed to continue telling this story so that the pain would not be forgotten and the hope for a fairer, more humane future would never fade. Inside the old Victorian house, where walls held many silent secrets and dangers, small lives endured burdens both physical and mental. Children, whether descendants of noble families or servants' offspring, had to wear multiple layers of heavy clothing, so cumbersome that their steps became hesitant and uncomfortable. The young man, having witnessed the injustices and hardships of Victorian life, now paid special attention to those little children, young lives facing challenges imposed by their very own attire. Children at that time were often wrapped in many layers of clothing, from delicate undergarments to thick dresses and cloaks. The purpose was to keep warm in cold winters and protect from dirt and toxic air. But this caused restriction, limited movement, making it difficult for children to run and explore the world around them. He saw children with flushed faces, drenched in sweat beneath heavy clothes, their eyes sometimes tired from the confinement and discomfort. Their natural development was affected, both physically and mentally, as they could not move freely as they should. Additionally, the dirty, unsanitary, and hazardous living environment made children vulnerable to common diseases like malaria, diarrhea, and pneumonia. He had heard the cries of children suffering from malaria and the helplessness of mothers lacking knowledge and medical resources to heal them. Malaria, a dangerous mosquito-borne disease, was a constant threat in areas flooded with mud and horse manure like the streets around the house. Weak children with poor immunity were easily struck down by illness in silence and solitude. Yet amid all these hardships, people turned to a simple but effective method: spending time outdoors, walking on green paths, and breathing fresh air. He followed a mother leading her small child outside, crossing muddy streets to a nearby small garden where lush trees stood and gentle golden sunlight shone. The fresh air helped improve children's health, boosted their immune systems, and reduced the risk of infectious diseases. Light outdoor activity also stimulated children's physical and mental development. He saw children's bright eyes and excited steps on the soft grass. It was a rare image of freedom and joy in a world full of challenges. Gradually, he realized that although Victorian life had many limitations, natural and simple methods remained the key to overcoming difficulties. The story of children wearing heavy clothes, living in unsanitary and disease-prone conditions, yet finding comfort in fresh air and outdoor activity, is not only a tale of the past, but also a valuable lesson for the present and future. He stood by the window looking out to where children were running and breathing the fresh air, promising himself to tell this story to remind everyone of the value of freedom, health, and nature. Night fell over the old neighborhood of Victoria City, the faint light from flickering candles and gas lamps creating a scene both mysterious and full of dangers. In the damp old house, every creak of wood and metal echoed through the rotten walls, increasing the sense of unease lurking in the space. Here, there was not only the harshness of the era, but also silent risks ready to explode at any moment. Dangers from gas lamps and candles, eerie noises of the old house, and the absence of modern alarm systems making every minute full of peril. The young man, familiar with the challenging life of the Victorian era, stood in that dark room, sensing every small sound as an invisible warning. He knew that beyond the house's outward splendor, hidden dangers could take anyone's life in an instant. Using gas lamps and candles as sources of nighttime light had become an indispensable habit in every household. Gas lamps with warm yellow light helped people see in the dark, while candles brought coziness and romance. But these benefits came with deadly dangers. Gas leaks, uncontrolled fire spread, toxic smoke causing suffocation, and no warning system to prevent them in time. He had witnessed a fire breaking out from a gas lamp in the living room, quickly spreading and forcing the whole family to flee in panic. Fortunately, no one died, but the property damage was significant. Such accidents were not rare. The lax inspection and maintenance of gas systems, along with carelessness in using candles, made the risk of fire an ever-present threat. Additionally, the old wooden structure of the house emitted creaking sounds, wind whistled through door cracks and gaps, making the atmosphere cold and fearful. Those sounds made residents uneasy, unable to sleep, as if the walls were telling mysterious and gloomy stories from the past. He understood that this unease affected not only sleep, but also deeply impacted mental health and the quality of life of everyone in the house. In a world lacking modern fire alarms, sirens, or gas sensors, every accident could lead to serious consequences. Detecting gas leaks or fires early was nearly impossible, increasing the risk of loss of life and property. Servants, familiar with every hidden corner of the house, lived in constant fear as they moved through dark corridors, carrying flickering candles full of danger. They knew well that a slight carelessness could cause the fire to flare fiercely, collapsing the entire house and threatening everyone's life. He had heard many whispered stories about tragic house fires, the tragic deaths of unfortunate families, cries for help echoing in the dark. Those stories were not just personal hauntings, but warnings for the whole society about ever-present risks in daily life. Despite knowing the dangers, city residents had no other choice because gas lamps and candles were the only sources of light usable at the time. Technology had not developed to provide safer solutions, and changing habits was difficult. He looked out the small window, the flickering light outside reflecting on the muddy street. Tonight, like many nights before, he could not sleep peacefully because of the fear that fire could break out at any moment. But in his heart, another flame was kindled, the flame of desire for change, the wish to build a safer life for everyone. He silently thought of reformers, inventors, and hardworking people who daily contributed to progress. One day soon, when technology advanced and community awareness rose, flames would no longer be threats but symbols of warmth and hope. In that dark room, the wind howling through door cracks and the creaking of old wooden beams sounded like a gloomy symphony of time. He listened, pondered, and remembered every sound, every moment, to be able to tell this story. A story about the fragility of life, silent dangers, and the desire to overcome fate in a world full of uncertainties.